Good afternoon. I'm Bill Smith. Today I'm going to talk about QALYS and the challenge of QALYS in rating rare disease drugs. There are a number of problems with the QALY methodology, but one of my gravest concerns is about how the QALY model, particularly as used by ICER, is problematic for cost effectiveness reviews for rare disease drugs. So first, one of the reasons I'm so concerned is because coming out of the biopharma labs are more and more orphan, or what we might call ultra-orphan drugs, drugs for smaller populations for rarer diseases. There's a technical definition by the FDA of an orphan drug. There's no real technical definition of a drug or an ultra-orphan drug or a rare disease drug. But basically what's happening, as you can see from this slide, traditionally in pharma, the goal was to invent a product for a general practitioner, get 1 million patients on the drug, charge $1,000 a year, and boom, you have $1 billion blockbuster. Increasingly, we're moving down the pyramid towards the orphan and ultra-orphan type drugs, that the population universe is smaller of patients, 10,000 or even 5,000, and the prices are higher, as they would be for any drug or any product that's only sold to a small number of customers. So this is where the Blockbuster model for the industry has been going. This slide is from 2010, and these trends have actually accelerated. So here's some data on the number of orphan disease or rare disease drugs that are being approved. So in 2018, 34 of the 59 new drugs approved by the FDA were for rare or orphan diseases. And those numbers are even greater for orphan drug indications. So 2018, there were 107 new orphan drug indications. That's 20% of the total number of orphan indications that are approved under the entire timeline of the orphan drug in 1980. So 23% of these indications were approved just in 2 years. And specialty products, which again, this technical definition of specialty products overlaps, but is not identical with orphan drugs. But generally, specialty drugs are taken by smaller patient populations than small molecule drugs. Specialty drugs are expected to represent 2/3 of newly launched medicines over the next 5 years, with oncology drugs 30%. So orphan drugs could represent 45% of the new active substances by 2023. So the ICER's reviews of these drugs are enormously important. So, and of course, the spending is reflected in these trends. Specialty medicines have gone from a 11% share of spending on pharmaceuticals to 43% in 2017. Orphan drugs have risen from 4% to 10%. And the median price for an oncology drug could exceed $100,000 by 2023. And my guess is it'll be closer to $100,000. Now, there's been a lot of Chicken Littles saying the sky is falling, we can't sustain these costs in these drugs, and I'm very skeptical about that because we're seeing so many patent expirations, LOEs, loss of exclusivities by major small molecule blockbuster drugs those LOEs are generating enormous savings. LOEs will account for $95 billion in drug cost reductions over the next 5 years, and they accounted for $26 billion in savings for 2019 alone. So my view, at least for the foreseeable window we can see for about the next 5 years, these rare disease and orphan disease drugs are affordable by the healthcare system. But payers are very concerned, and they have adopted all sorts of techniques that many in the audience will be familiar with. Specialty tiers, prior authorization, increasing co-insurance or co-pays, the use of co-coupons. There's a whole panoply of tactics that health plans are using with the growth in specialty drugs. And in the bottom right corner, you'll see what I want to talk about today is QALYS. You're adopting these European-style cost-effectiveness studies as embodied in ICER's use of QALYS. So what is a QALY? QALY is a cost effectiveness methodology that measures the ability of a new therapy to extend life and to improve. So there are two poles that they measure therapy. And they use a scale from 0 to 1, with 0 representing death and 1 representing a full year of lived in perfect health. So let's take a very simplistic example. So say there's an oncology, gives 6 months of life, additional life, and has significant side effects. So it gets a 0.5 score on both longevity and quality of life. So the QALY methodology then provides a threshold value for a year of life lived in perfect health. And this is a bit where the arbitrary nature of the QALY creeps in. ICER uses a threshold of about 100,000 to 150,000, maybe 175,000. They change it on occasion, which is part of the arbitrary nature of these things. So if the drug scored a point on its longevity and quality of life score, and they rate a year of life as between $150,000, then the cost effective if it was in the range of 50,000 to 75,000. That's how the QALYs work. Now, again, the arbitrary nature of this, if you value the year of a human life at 100,000 to 150,000, let's say you value a year of human life at $1. That's somewhat arbitrary also. And the only medicine that might be cost effective if you rated life at $1, regimen of generic aspirin. If you rated the life as being valued at $1 billion, then most every therapy on the market would be affordable. So, the model is going to spit out what the inputs are to the model, and that's one of the challenges I think for the use of QALYs. And QALYs again are used extensively in Europe. NICE in the UK is the most famous example, and they're really an import into the United States with ICER. So there are 3 sets, in my view, of limitations on QALYs: ethical, methodological, and contextual. And let me go through these quickly. From an ethical perspective, should you deny a drug to, say, an oncology patient based on an ICER review? That, in my mind, is relatively problematic, given that the cost-effectiveness reviews had these arbitrary criteria baked into them. There are also all sorts of methodological problems. Many health economists have written about them. I'm not going to go into great detail, but for example, many times ICER does the review after a drug has just been approved by the FDA. So if you have a rare disease drug, the clinical trials were quite small. The amount of data that's available is quite small, and yet they're making cost effectiveness assumptions and reviews and conclusions about the clinical trials that had limited data. So there are also other methodological questions, like how many specialists should be involved in the discussion. When ICERs, they tend to not have a great number of specialists when they review some kind of product in a therapeutic area. And one of the big challenges, I think, in the future is going to be what about personalized medicine? They do these reviews based on one size fits all. They review the drug and they say it should be worth X, but it might well in certain people with certain genetic makeups and quite poorly in others. So the drug really should be rated based on its ability to work in a personal way for patients. So that's some of the methodological problems. Contextual, and I think the rare disease problem falls into the contextual category. So for example, because they rate drugs and therapies on their ability to extend life, that may discriminate against, for example, oncology patients or the elderly, which may have fewer life years to give. And because they rate it based on the quality of life, people living with disabilities may get poor ratings for their drugs, because unless the drug actually cures their disability, gets them out of the wheelchair, gets them full use of all their body, the drug is going to get a smaller rating. So these contextual issues are problematic when you look at specific patient populations and the use of ICER. So this is a particular problem for rare disease drugs because, as I mentioned earlier, and as this audience probably knows, drugs for very rare diseases end up being quite expensive. And the QALY life threshold amount, $150,000 to $175,000 for a year of life lived to the full doesn't really work when it comes to some of these gene therapies or therapies that apply to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 or 4,000 patients, because the prices have to be high given the R&D investments. Has played around with the model, and they've said we can go up to 500 threshold, but we're not going to necessarily use that threshold. It's all very vague. They say that they'll do societal analysis when it comes to ultra rare disease drugs, such as patient and caregiver productivity and how that might be helped. But basically, they haven't changed the model substantially for rare disease drugs, as you will see. So limitations to how ICER classifies ultra rare disease drugs. Ultra rare disease definition is not aligned with any US law. The FDA doesn't recognize something called ultra rare diseases. And contextual factors are not built in, and these patients with rare diseases, huge contextual issues, as people know. And it ignores, as I mentioned before, the advances in personalized medicine. They can only, when they do these reviews, use limited data from clinical trials, because they're doing the reviews typically soon after the drug is approved. Don't take my word for it. You can see how problematic the ICER reviews are for orphan or rare disease drugs. Based on the Health Affairs study that was put out recently. The Health Affairs looked at votes on 48 treatments over a couple of years. They looked at both cancer therapies and rare disease drugs. And they roughly used the $500,000 a year QALY threshold. 4 of the 5 rare disease drugs were rated a low value because their cost exceeded the $500,000. And the other drug that was rated of intermediate value. The cancer treatments did a little better, but most of them were rated of intermediate value, and 37% were rated of a low value. So rare disease drugs do not score well in the ICER methodology, and that is highly problematic in my mind. I think the model does not fit the business model of the launching of rare disease drugs. And I think with the gene therapies and other rare disease coming down the pipeline, that's going to be a very major problem for patients in particular, but also their physicians. Thank you.